What's up, Raptors fans? Welcome to the Warriors Report. I'm sorry I have not been posting consistently. School has been driving me absolutely insane. I get a little bit of a break from school, so I'll try and post as much as I can. But I want to talk about today's video, and that is 5 bold predictions for this year's upcoming season for the Toronto Raptors. So before we get into the details of the video, guys, you know the drill. Give this video a thumbs up. It does help reach more basketball fans like yourself. I also do give out shout outs to random subscribers on this channel as well. So for today's video, the shout out goes to Darren M. Bicknell. So Darren, sorry if I mispronounced your last name there. Thank you for your continued support of this channel through your likes and your comments. And if you guys want a shout out, you can always let me know in the comment section below. And it'd be awesome if you guys want to subscribe as well. It does help the channel grow quite a bit. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. So my first bold prediction for the Toronto Raptors will be, and this is going to be quite a bold statement, that is Gary Trent Jr. will be the Toronto Raptors' second leading scorer behind Pascal Siakam. Now, I know what you guys are thinking. This is insane. You're putting Gary Trent Jr. ahead of guys like OG Anunoby, Fred VanVleet. But let's talk about Fred VanVleet. When you talk about Gary Trent Jr. being the second leading scorer, we know Fred VanVleet can really get his points as well. But I think his role will change from previous seasons. We know he played with Kyle Lowry, and he was more of the shooting guard position, and Kyle Lowry was more of the facilitator. I think Fred VanVleet will take a little bit more of the role of being a point guard. Now, I know there's been a lot of question marks by fans, by a lot of Raptors fans, saying that Fred VanVleet cannot pass. He's a traditional shooting guard. He is not a point guard, but give him a chance. I think he's really going to fit himself into that role where he'll take a backseat and look to pass a little bit more, not score as much. So I think Fred VanVleet won't be scoring as much as he would normally if he was playing with Kyle Lowry. And when you talk about OG Anunoby, I don't doubt that OG Anunoby can be our second leading scorer. The reason I say Gary Trent Jr. is because of the high volume of shots he takes. I know a lot of us Raptors fans are familiar with how many shots he takes. I believe last season, he averaged about 15 or 16 shots per game. Now, obviously, he needs to get those percentages up a little bit. He said he's been working on his game quite a bit this offseason, so hopefully that pays off. I can see Gary Trent Jr. being a 20-plus point game scorer. Obviously, Pascal Siakam is going to be out the first season as well, so it'll be really interesting to see how OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. really up their offensive game. But let's move on to our second bold statement, which is the Toronto Raptors will be a top 5 team in the East this season. Now, yes, I know I'm not the only one who feels this way, because there's been a lot of fans, a lot of Raptors fans have been talking about how the Raptors, everyone keeps saying they're a play-in tournament. They're going to be in the play-in tournament. They're going to be 7, 8, 9, 10. But I don't believe so. People keep forgetting that the Raptors had, yes, we can talk about those COVID injuries. We can talk about being in Tampa, but everyone seems to forget the last 10, 15 games of the season. The Raptors purposely tanked. Let's be honest, we sat down all of our starters when we could have easily won 8, 9 more games ending the season. And we had 27 games, I believe we won last season, and add 8 more wins to that. And obviously, again, you can bunch in a lot of factors such as COVID injuries, not being at home. There's a lot of other factors people don't realize as well, which is the fact that Norman Powell really got off to a slow start. You can contribute Aaron Baines and Alex Len, and essentially having no center until we got Kemp Birch. We were forced to play small ball lineup at some points. Nick Nurse was even forcing kind of Aaron Baines into that role because we had no choice. OG Anunoby can only play center for so long. So it was one of those awful seasons where we didn't have a consistent center. Having Kemp Birch and having Precious Achiuwa will help, as well as I mentioned, Norman Powell, as great as he was to end the season, or end, I should say, his last few months with the Raptors, he really got off to an awful start, and that didn't help as well because our bench scoring was really struggling. So I do believe the Raptors will be a top 4 team. When you talk about Raptors being a top 5 team, I should say, not top 4. But when you talk about Raptors being top 4 team, obviously you got the 2 teams ahead of them, Brooklyn, Milwaukee. We know those 2 teams are going to be ahead of us. I think Atlanta Hawks you can place in that 3rd spot as well. Now, there's a lot of people saying Philadelphia 76ers. I believe there's too many question marks around the 76ers. Joel Embiid, his health has always been a question mark every single season. He misses games, so I don't know about that. And then, of course, we have the Miami Heat as well. But let's talk about them really quickly here when we talk about the Raptors being ahead of them in the standings. Now, Miami Heat, as great as they are, they're not built for the regular season. And no, I'm not just talking about last season, because when you talk about the Miami Heat, you look at their top 3 players, which is Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, no particular order, but Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry have had injury issues throughout their entire careers. They have not played full seasons, except for one. Both of them combined have played one full season together. Excuse me, I should say two full seasons, one for Jimmy Butler, one for Kyle Lowry. So if those two guys are out with injuries, who else is stepping up for the Miami Heat? You're relying on guys like Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson to kind of step up. Obviously, they have Victor Oladipo as well. He's got his own injury issues as well. So I do really believe the Raptors will be a top 5 team in the East. Now let's move on to our third bold prediction. Now this is going to kind of tie in with the Raptors being a top 5 team in the East. I believe the Raptors will be top 10 in defense and offense. Now, again, another very bold take here because obviously we signed a lot of great defensive players in this year's NBA offseason. We didn't really get a go-to scorer. So how are the Raptors going to improve on offense as well? Well, let's take a look at this chart I'm going to present to you guys. When you take a look at the points per game last season, the difference between where the Raptors are and the top 10 team, the 10th team, in fact, the Clippers, is a differential of 4 points, 4 points on the offensive side. And we can contribute a lot of that. As I talked about, Aaron Baines, Alex Len, we were essentially getting no production offensively from both of our centers, actually. So it was a lot of a struggle. Now, when you talk about Khem Birch and Precious Achiuwa, we can talk about those two guys giving you a lot more points, better defense, and we know better defense turns into better offense. So I think having guys like Khem Birch who will easily give you 10, 12 points, which is about, 4 or 5 more points than Aaron Baines was giving. And then obviously Precious Achiuwa can give you similar numbers as well. And then no one's talking about Goran Dragic. We're going to have a bench this season. Goran Dragic is easily capable of giving you 15 points off the bench. I expect Chris Boucher to be a lot better off of the bench, and Malachi Flynn is going to be improved. And then, of course, you got Scotty Barnes as well. So when you talk about the Raptors being a top 10 offense, is the fact that the Raptors actually have a bench this season. Again, last season, Norman Powell got off to a slow start off of the bench. It wasn't until he was put in as a starter, which really helped him kind of get into a flow on his offensive game. But the Raptors didn't really have anyone on the bench outside of maybe Chris Boucher. A lot of the other guys were getting inconsistent minutes. Malachi Flynn didn't get inconsistent minutes. Matt Thomas was playing maybe once every 4th game. Then we had Stanley Johnson. We have other guys as well who are really exactly producing offensively. So I believe the Raptors bench alone is going to push them into a top 10. And then obviously you expect improvements from guys like Trent Jr., and OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam as well. So I expect the Raptors to be a top 10 offense as well. And then we obviously got shooters too, Svi Mykhailiuk as well. I think he's going to be a really good bench player for us as well. So let's move on to our 4th bold prediction for the Raptors. And that is that the Raptors will not have any All-Stars this season. Now, this may not be as bold as some of the other takes I've given you, but the reason I believe the Raptors will have no All-Stars this season is because we know Pascal, who is very likely, who's obviously been an All-Star in the past, was probably the best candidate to become an All-Star. He's going to be out for the first about month or so, so he's unlikely to get into the All-Star game without a doubt, and he's going to be probably load managing as well. Now, when you talk about the other two guys, Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby. Now, OG Anunoby, I think he will put up all-star numbers. I don't think he'll get in just because it is a popularity contest. And that goes for Fred VanVleet as well. Although those are names most people are familiar with. As Raptors fans, we know this very well. Unfortunately, the All-Star voting by fans is a popularity contest. We've seen that in the past with guys like Klay Thompson being out the entire season. Yet they're getting more votes than guys like Damian Lillard, Mike Conley, and DeMar DeRozan as well. And that the same thing goes for the East as well. Kyrie Irving, I believe, was out, for his first season with the Brooklyn Nets for several months, yet he was still leading candidate, better than what some of the other guys were doing. So it's unfortunate, but it's a popularity contest. I just don't see any Raptors being all-stars this season. Yes, we got the reserves as well, but again, it entirely depends on how the Raptors record will be. I mean, if Bradley Beal can average 30-plus points and not be included in the all-star team, I don't think that's a big far stretch to say Fred VanVleet or OG Anunoby may not be all-stars this season. So let's move on to our final and last bold prediction for the Raptors, our 5th bold prediction for the Raptors. And that is that the Raptors will make a really big trade involving Goran Dragic and Chris Boucher, potentially others. Now, what that big trade will be, I can't really say. You can obviously throw out names out there. I think it could be a real possibility that whether it's at the NBA trade deadline or it happens before, maybe the Raptors are involved in the Ben Simmons trade. And no, I'm not saying the Raptors will acquire Ben Simmons. They could be that third team that moves the salary around, to move the pieces around to help facilitate a trade. So that could be one of the possibilities that when you talk about Raptors making a big trade this season, they have the salary cap, they have the salary fillers to kind of throw in pieces in a trade. Obviously, Goran Dragic's salary. We got Chris Boucher. We got some young players we can throw in there as well. So I'm not going to throw in names, but we got some young pieces and future first-round picks we can throw in there to make a really big trade. Now, another name I've been thinking about lately. I know it's very unlikely to happen, but Karl Anthony Towns is a name I've been thinking. He's obviously voiced his frustration about their, I believe it's their president of operations that got fired. He wasn't very happy with that firing. Now, obviously, he has yet to request any sort of trade, but maybe the Raptors get in on that trade again. Like I said, I'm not going to throw any young pieces out there because we have a lot of nice young pieces that I personally wouldn't trade. But if a name like that comes around, there's a real possibility the Raptors get involved in a trade like that. We have some really intriguing pieces, and also maybe someone like a Miles Turner as well, who may not cost as much. So it'll be interesting to see what the Raptors do with Goran Dragic, obviously his salary, and just how they're able to facilitate a trade. Now, I say Chris Boucher, and this is something I've talked about in the past, but when you talk about Chris Boucher, he's very likely, I believe he's making $7-8 million this season. But when you talk about Chris Boucher being a free agent next year, he's up there in age. He's going to be, I believe, 29 by the end of this season, and he's going to demand a decent amount of money, which the Raptors don't have. So I think they'll definitely try to use him as a trade chip to kind of include, whether that's included in a Goran Dragic trade or whether that's a separate trade. I think they will try to trade him. But let's see what happens with the Raptors season. These are my 5 bold predictions for the Raptors season. I want to hear your guys's. What do you guys think? Do you guys agree with some of these bold takes? Do you disagree? What are your bold statements? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you guys are still watching this video, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.